My name is Neha, and I'm 22 years old. You might be wondering how a girl my age ends up living with her uncle, especially given what I'm about to tell you. Honestly, I never imagined this would happen either. I'm studying graphic design, and most of my time is spent drawing, designing, and doing freelance work. Life has been a challenge ever since my parents divorced when I was younger. I moved around a lot, trying to find stability. Eventually, I ended up staying with my uncle Daniel. It wasn't part of the plan. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end. And like the video, because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. It all started when my mom had to go away for work, and I needed somewhere to stay while finishing college. Daniel, my uncle, was the only family member who could help. He's been married to his wife Victoria for a few years. Now they live in a beautiful house in the countryside far from the city. I thought it would just be another temporary move to a quiet place. But things didn't turn out. How I expected, a few months later, I had adjusted to the house, the routine, and the peacefulness, or so I thought. But today, something happened. Something I need to share. It started when I walked into Daniel's room while he was asleep. But before I explain, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can stay updated with the rest of this story. Let me tell you a little about Daniel. He's not like most uncles to me. He's always been more of a mentor than a family member growing up. He taught me how to ride a bike, fix things around the house, and even bought me my first car when I turned 18. So when my mom needed someone to take me in, Daniel was the obvious choice. He's thoughtful, patient, and very kind. But it wasn't just him. I was moving in with his wife. Victoria had been in the picture for a while. They married 2 years ago. And at first I wasn't too sure about her. She's older than Daniel, and something about her made me feel like an outsider in their home. Initially, I stayed in the guest room at the far end of the house, trying not to intrude. Over time. Things became less awkward, and Victoria started giving me advice on cooking, cleaning, and household matters. We weren't best friends, but it wasn't as tense as it was before. I thought things were getting better, but recently I've noticed something I can't explain. The more time I spent with Daniel, the more I felt drawn to him. His smiles, the occasional touch of his hand, and the way he would look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. It felt different. I couldn't ignore it. A tension between us began to build, an energy that was impossible to escape. I know what you're thinking. Neha, what are you talking about? He's your uncle. It sounds crazy. I know, but this connection is undeniable. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was in my head. But every time we were alone, the atmosphere felt charged, as if something was pulling us together. Here's where things get interesting. One evening after dinner, I was working on a project in my room when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Daniel had been napping for hours and Victoria was out with friends. We were alone. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I heard the door to his bedroom creak open. I froze for a second, unsure whether to leave him to rest or go inside. But something pulled me toward him quietly. I opened the door, trying not to disturb him. He was lying on his back, one arm behind his head, looking peaceful as he slept. The light from the window cast soft shadows over his face, making him look almost untouchable. I stood there for a moment, my heart racing. I could feel my face flush, my pulse quicken. I'd never felt this way before. Maybe I just wanted to look at him, or maybe it was something more I didn't know. My thoughts were interrupted when I accidentally knocked over a vase near his bed. The sound made Daniel stir. His eyes opened, and for a brief moment we locked gaze. There was confusion in his eyes, but something else too. Something I couldn't quite name. He blinked a few times, trying to focus on me, then let out a groggy laugh. Neha, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice thick with sleep. My heart was racing as I struggled to find the right words. I didn't want to look like I was snooping. but I didn't know how to explain myself. My mouth went dry. I didn't mean to wake you, I stammered, feeling embarrassed. Daniel sat up, slowly rubbing his eyes. He smiled at me, the same kind, patient smile he always gave. But today there was something different in his eyes, something that made my heart race. He studied me for a moment before speaking again. "It's okay," he said gently. "You know you can always talk to me, Neha. I'm here for you." I nodded, but my mind was spinning. I didn't know how to deal with this strange feeling. The room felt heavy and I could feel my breath coming faster. I just wanted to talk. I whispered. Daniel's smile faded just a little, and I thought I saw a brief hesitation in his eyes before it vanished. He patted the bed next to him. "Come here, then you can always talk to me," he said warmly. I stood there for a moment, unsure, but something inside me pushed me forward without thinking. I sat next to him. The tension between us was thick, heavier than ever. I could feel the heat of his body next to mine, his cologne filling the air. We were so close that I could hear his breathing and feel the rise and fall of his chest. With each breath, my heart raced again, and slowly, almost in slow motion, I looked up at him. Our faces were so close that I could feel his warmth. His gaze was soft, unsure, but there was something else, a spark that made my skin tingle. Are you okay?" Daniel asked gently before I could answer. I leaned in closer to him. My pulse was racing and my breath caught in my chest. I couldn't explain it, but everything felt so intense, as though the air itself was charged. Daniel didn't pull away. His eyes held mine with quiet intensity. He didn't speak, but his breath quickened. Mirroring mine, the room felt warmer. The silence between us deepened with unspoken words. My mind was in a whirlwind. Everything had led to this moment. I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I leaned in my lips, trembling as if I were in a dream. They brushed against his. At first it was uncertain, tentative, but then, as his lips met mine, soft and gentle, I couldn't stop myself. My mind screamed for me to stop, but my body refused. I needed this. I wanted this. Daniel's hand cued my cheek, urging me closer. His other hand rested beside us, grazing my skin. I could feel the heat of his touch. The kiss deepened, and soon it was hard to tell where his lips ended, and mine began. The rest of the world disappeared. It was just the two of us caught in this undeniable connection. My mind raced with confusion, guilt, but also with a strange sense of rightness. What were we doing? Why did it feel so necessary? There were no words to explain it, no logic behind it. He pulled away for just a moment, his forehead resting against mine. Our breathing was heavy, each breath shaky and slow. I could feel his pulse again against my skin, matching the rapid beat of my own heart. "Neha." His voice was soft, strained with something deeper. We shouldn't, but I wasn't sure. Sure, I agreed. Something inside me refused to acknowledge any reason to stop. Slowly, I reached for his hand, intertwining my fingers with his. He didn't pull away. His fingers curled around mine, holding on to me just as tightly as I was holding on to him. Our eyes met, and for a long moment we didn't speak. The weight of everything hung between us. Could we? My hand instinctively moved to the back of his neck, pulling him closer. I kissed him again this time. There was no hesitation, no fear, just the overwhelming need to stay close to him, to feel his presence. Daniel's hand slid down my back, drawing me closer. The contact of our bodies made everything feel incredibly intense.
"I don't want to hurt you." I closed my eyes, trying to find my voice. Everything inside me screamed to stop, to pull away, but I couldn't. The longing was too strong, the need too powerful. I didn't want to think anymore, didn't want to question anything. I just wanted to be with him. I'm sure I whispered, my hands moving over his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath my fingertips. "I want this, Daniel. I want you. His lips found mine again, and this time the kiss was deeper, more urgent. There was no turning back now. The world outside of this room didn't matter. There was only the way he made me feel desired, needed, and alive in a way I had never experienced before. The room seemed to close in around us, the light dimming as the intensity of our connection grew. Every touch, every kiss, felt like a promise of something more, something neither of us fully understood, but were both ready to explore. I could feel his heartbeat steady against mine, syncing with the rhythm of my own, and even though part of me still fought against the reality of what was happening, a much larger part of me surrendered completely. It wasn't just kissing anymore. It was more than that. It was a connection I couldn't explain, a bond that went beyond words. I've wanted this for so long, Daniel whispered, his breath warm against my lips. I could barely comprehend his words as my hands roamed over him, feeling the muscles beneath his skin, the heat of him, the way he responded to me, but there was no turning back now. There was only the pull between us, drawing us closer, in a way neither of us had expected. Time seemed to stand still as we lost ourselves in each other, in the quiet rhythm of our kisses, the warmth of our touches, and for the first time everything felt right in the stillness of the room. We were no longer just uncle and niece. We were two people, bound by something deeper, something more intense than anything I had ever known. The air between Daniel and me hung thick with tension, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking. The silence was suddenly shattered by the sound of the front door opening downstairs. We froze. My heart raced and I quickly pulled away from Daniel, panic flooding my chest. What had we just done? What was happening between us? The guilt washed over me, but it was mingled with something else. Desire I couldn't ignore. I felt trapped between the moment we had just shared and the reality that we were entangled in something we couldn't easily undo. Daniel didn't move right away. His eyes were locked on mine, but his expression was unreadable. I could feel the heat between us, the lingering closeness that hadn't yet dissipated. Neha. He whispered, his voice strained before he could say anything more. The sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs. Daniel heard a voice I immediately recognized. My heart sank. It was Victoria. I quickly jumped off the bed, my breath quick and shallow. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced in every direction, but I couldn't think of a way out of this. Was I really going to face her after what had just happened? The door to Daniel's room creaked open, and there she was, Victoria, standing in the doorway, surprise written all over her face. Her eyes flickered between Daniel and me, confusion crossing her features as she took in the scene. Neha, Daniel, what's going on here? She asked, her voice uncertain. But there was something else, an intuition, maybe, that told her something was wrong. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Victoria's presence was like a bucket of cold water, and in that moment everything felt wrong. There was no way to explain this, no way to justify what had just happened between Daniel and me. My throat tightened as I struggled to find the words. I stammered, unsure of what to say. Daniel, now sitting on the bed, looked just as lost. His hand rubbed the back of his neck, clearly embarrassed, unsure how to explain it. Victoria's gaze moved from him to me, and there was an unspoken understanding between us. It was as if in that single moment everything shifted. Victoria knew something had happened. Something that shouldn't have, but her reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of anger or disappointment, there was only a deep, unsettling sadness in her eyes. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Her presence was commanding, and the room fell into an odd, tense silence like the calm before a storm. Neha, you need to understand something, Victoria said gently, her voice softer than I anticipated. There's more to this than you realize, more than either of you understand. I looked at her, confusion flooding my mind. What did she mean? What more was there? The silence lingered even after Victoria left. Her words hung in the air, leaving a mark on both of us. Despite all the confusion, her calm understanding and offer of guidance gave me something unexpected: hope. Victoria wasn't angry. She didn't cast us aside. Instead, she gave us a chance that felt fragile and uncertain. But still there, I glanced at Daniel. His face was a mixture of guilt and confusion and something else I couldn't quite identify. He was avoiding my gaze, his hands nervously rubbing together. I knew he felt the weight of what had happened, the way our worlds had collided unexpectedly. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that none of this was anyone's plan. Things had unfolded beyond our control. What I knew for sure was that we couldn't ignore it. We couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. Victoria was right about that. The feelings and confusion, everything had to be addressed, and it had to be faced. Head on, Daniel. I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. What do we do now? Daniel looked at me, his eyes full of a mix of emotions. I don't know, Neha. I don't know what to feel, what to think. I don't know if I should be angry, ashamed, or if I'm even allowed to feel anything at all. His voice cracked, revealing the internal struggle in his words. He was torn between the deep connection we had shared and his loyalty to Victoria, his wife. The situation couldn't be solved in one conversation. It wasn't that simple. I took a deep breath and walked toward him. Closing the distance between us, I wanted to reach out to him to comfort him, but I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do. I didn't know what was right anymore. I don't think we'll figure everything out right now, I said softly. But I think we need to talk, to be honest with each other. This is too complicated to ignore. Daniel nodded slowly, his expression serious but not angry. Yeah, I know, I don't know where to start. I took his hand, the touch both comforting and charged with unspoken emotion. We start by admitting what happened, what we felt, what we still feel, and then we figure out what comes next. He nodded again, his expression softening just a little. It's not going to be easy, Neha, but I want to understand. I want to understand what's happening between us. I squeezed his hand, the contact both comforting and filled with unspoken emotions. I don't have all the answers, Daniel. I don't know what happens next, but I'm not running from this, not anymore. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. There was no clear way forward, no easy answers. The emotions, the confusion. It was all so overwhelming, but what Victoria had offered us was a lifeline, the space to face everything together, to confront the mess we had found ourselves in. I looked at Daniel again, and for the first time I felt that no matter what happened next, we would face it with honesty. There was no perfect solution, no simple way to fix things, but there was hope for understanding and healing, and maybe even for something more. As I sat back, my thoughts racing with all the possibilities, I couldn't help but think of Victoria and what she had said. Her calmness and her offer of understanding had opened up a door I didn't even know existed. She hadn't rejected us. She hadn't condemned us. Instead, she had given us room to breathe, room to process what had happened, but what would happen next? How would things unfold if we admitted the depth of what we still felt? Could we move forward, or would the weight of it all be too much? But those were questions for another time. Right now, it was just Daniel and me sitting together in the silence of our shared uncertainty. We both knew nothing would ever be the same again. The only thing we could do is take the next step, whatever that might be, and somehow together we would figure it out.